Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. It was around 2 in the early morning hours. I'd just left one of those all-night house parties, one that felt more like a whirlwind of loud music and heavy drinking than any ordinary gathering. I'd driven myself there in my dependable yet unremarkable '92 Honda Accord. After a night of overindulgence, the fuel gauge was the mirror image of my own energy level, bordering on empty. I steered my trusty steed into an eerily deserted gas station. This wasn't one of those clean, well-lit places you might find off a highway, but a dimly lit, out-of-the-way spot that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the '80s. The only light source was a flickering fluorescent bulb that swung lazily in the night breeze. Just as I was about to start pumping gas into my car, a behemoth of a truck pulled up next to me. A towering monstrosity of rusted metal and growling engine that seemed like it belonged in another era. My heart beat hard in my chest as a flood of discomfort took over me. Was it the monstrous truck? Its engine snarling in the silence of the night, or the solitude of the deserted station that sent a chill down my spine? I couldn't tell. I moved to the back of my car, grabbing the cold, metal fuel pump. It was a familiar routine. Lift the handles to let the fuel grade insert the nozzle. Yet everything felt intensified under the dim, flickering light and in a hush of the deserted station. I could hear the liquid flowing through the hose, a low gurgle that soon was drowned out by the rhythmic thud of fuel filling the tank. The car shuddered slightly with each thump, as though sharing my nervous anticipation. A burly figure clambered out of the truck next to me, each step heavy and purposeful. The station's dismal light barely grazed him, leaving his features obscured in a haunting shadow. My mind, foggy from the evening's festivities, began playing tricks on me. In his hand, I saw a sinister glint. It could have been the light reflecting off a harmless object, but in my paranoia, it morphed into a knife, then a gun. Panic surged within me, a tidal wave threatening to sweep me off my feet. Without thinking twice, I pulled the pump out of my car, a trail of fuel dribbling onto the asphalt. I practically threw myself into the driver's seat, not even bothering to secure the gas cap. So, with adrenaline surging through my veins, I jumped into the car. My hands were shaking so bad I could hardly insert the key into the ignition. It was like every horror movie I'd ever seen, where the car takes forever to start, while the monster closes in. As I turned the key, I prayed to every god I knew, begging them to start the car. When the engine roared to life, I was so relieved, only to be replaced by some panic again. I still had to get out of there. I floored the gas pedal, the worn rubber slipping under my panicked foot. The car lurched forward, gravel crunching beneath the tires as I tore out of the station. In my haste, I didn't even switch on the headlights, the car a shadowy phantom racing against the night. My heart pounded in my ears as I glanced in the rear view mirror. The sight of the truck's headlights was like a terrifying beacon, piercing through the darkness. I shot out of the station like a bullet from a gun, leaving a cloud of dust and the scent of gasoline in my wake. Risking a glance in the rear view mirror, I saw the truck's headlights cut through the darkness. The monster was awake, and it was following me. My palms were sweaty against the steering wheel, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. With every turn, I expected the truck to be right on my tail, with the driver ready to exact some kind of twisted vengeance for my hasty exit. Just when I thought my old Accord couldn't take it any longer, another gas station came into view. An idea popped into my panic-addled brain. I could seek refuge over at someone, anyone about my ordeal. I veered into the station, tires squealing in protest against the sudden maneuver. The truck roared into the lot behind me, coming to a halt with an intimidating rumble. Abandoning my car, I sprinted towards the brightly lit convenience store. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the truck stationary, its headlights illuminating my mad dash. Bursting through the door of the convenience store, I pointed a trembling finger towards the sinister vehicle. The cashier, a young guy who looked just as startled as I felt, gaped at me in the truck and back at me. Without any warning, the truck roared to life again, the cacophonous sound echoing through the quiet night. As quickly as it had chased me, it retreated, peeling out of the gas station in a hurry, leaving nothing but a trail of dust and the echo of its crawling engine. I stood there, heaving and trembling, while the cashier tried to make sense of the sudden chaos. Eventually, I explained pay for my gas and somehow managed to make it home. I still can't explain what happened that night or who that truck driver was. All I know is that I dodged something potentially terrifying, something that could have ended much worse. These days, I make sure my tank is full before the sun sets, and whenever I see a rusted truck, my heart still races a little. I've got an after-party story that beats anyone else's, but it's one I hope never to repeat. So it was late one October night after a fun-filled evening with my friends. We had all gathered at my buddy's place for a promotion party. My buddy just got promoted at his work, and we were all stoked. Just good old friends catching up, laughing at old memories, some drinks, and music. I was the designated driver for the night, so while everyone else was letting loose, I was sipping on my soda, making sure everyone was having a good time. Among all my friends, Joe, who had had one too many drinks, needed a ride back home. Now, Joe lives on the other side of the town, so we were looking at a good 40-minute drive. Halfway through the deserted city, my car's fuel warning light started blinking. The empty streets, the dim city lights, and the blinking fuel light painted quite a dreary picture. With a good 20 miles still to cover, I had no choice but to pull into a 24-hour gas station on our route. This station was a shabby little place on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place you wouldn't stop at unless absolutely necessary. It was run down with its fair share of flickering lights and rusty fuel pumps, but at that ungodly hour, it was the only place I could turn to. Now, Joe was too tipsy to even realize we had stopped. He was dozing off in the car, lost in his drunken dreams. I decided to let him be and stepped out of the car into the cool night air. The strong smell of gasoline filled my nostrils as I started filling up the tank. The eerie silence was only broken by the soft hum of the fuel pump and the occasional sound of a distant car passing by. With the tank finally full, I headed into the convenience store attached to the station to pay. The store was barely bigger than a large room, filled with basic necessities. Shelves after shelves of snacks, drinks, toiletries, some canned food, and such. The cashier, an older man who looked like he had seen better days, was behind the counter, engrossed in some late-night show playing on a small TV in the corner. I took out my wallet, ready to pay and get out of there. But life had a different plan. Just as I was about to hand over the cash, the entrance door burst open with a loud noise. A man barged in, his face hidden behind a ski mask, and a gun in his hand. The entire scene felt surreal, as if someone had hit the play button on a thriller movie. The masked man yelled at the cashier, his voice muffled but his intentions clear. He was there to rob the place. I remember I was panicking. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but my body refused to move. But survival instincts kicked in, and I managed to quietly sneak behind a large fridge filled with chilled drinks. From my hiding spot, I could hear the chilling sound of the robber's threats, the cashier's panicked responses, and the rustling of cash being stuffed into a bag. Then came the sound I dreaded the most, gunshots, one and then two. The loud noise echoed in the small store, amplifying my panic. As I was crouched behind the fridge, praying for the nightmare to end, my thoughts drifted to Joe alone in the car, oblivious to the horror unfolding just a few feet away from him. I felt a surge of adrenaline and need to protect my friend, but what could I do? I was helpless in the situation. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the familiar sound of sirens filled the air. Help was on the way. The sirens grew louder and louder until everything else was drowned out. I took a peek from my hiding spot just as the police cars pulled into the station. What I saw next was a sight I'll never forget. The masked man was now on the floor, motionless, with the old cashier standing a few feet away, a gun in his trembling hand. He had shot the robber. The next few minutes felt like a whirlwind. Police officers flooded into the store, securing the area, talking to the cashier, collecting evidence. After what felt like an eternity, they noticed me crouched and terrified behind the fridge. They reassured me, asked me a few questions, and let me go. Once out of the store, the sight of Joe, still sleeping in the car, gave me some much-needed relief. I thought they would have got to him first. That night was supposed to be a simple drive home, but it had turned into something right out of a horror movie. That gas station, the masked man, the gunshots, they all became a part of my memory. I told Joe what happened, and he didn't believe me until he went past the gas station the next day. I remember it was one of those nights after a super long work shift. I was really tired and needed some fuel for myself and for my car. So I decided to stop by a 24-hour gas station that was just down the road. The place was pretty easy to spot because of its bright neon lights that could be seen from miles away. Now the place was always a bit eerie, especially late at night, but it also had a kind of comforting familiarity, you know. It was like a little island of light and activity in the middle of the sleeping city. Pulling up next to the pump, I got out of the car. This gas station, it was one of those old school places, illuminated by bright neon lights that cut through the thick night like a lighthouse in a stormy sea. The place, well, it always gave off this eerie vibe, especially when the clock ticked past midnight. But there was also something strangely comforting about it, perhaps its familiarity in a city that otherwise seemed to be sleeping. I stepped out, stretching out the kinks from the long drive. The gas station had its own unique scent, a strong whiff of gasoline that hit your nostrils, mingling with the cool night air. I inserted the fuel nozzle into my car, setting the pump to autofill mode. The familiar hum of the electric lines above filled the otherwise quiet night. The whole scenario was oddly unnerving that night. Perhaps it was the solitude or the exhaustion, but everything felt a bit amplified. Once I was done with the fueling, my hunger pangs kicked in with a vengeance. The convenience store at the gas station was my only option. You'd think for a store that operated around the clock, it'd be somewhat dull and deserted, but no. The place was so brightly lit that it almost hurt the eyes. The shelves, though, they were a sight for sore eyes, stocked with a colorful array of snacks, drinks, and a plethora of quick-to-grab meals. Starving as I was, I quickly picked up a sandwich and some chips. Not the most nutritionally balanced meal, but hey, hunger isn't picky, right? As the bored-looking cashier mechanically scanned my items, I happened to glance outside through the glass facade. What I saw made me freeze. A hooded figure, face hidden in shadows, was casually peering into my car. Panic and surprise hit me like a punch, and I abandoned my stuff on the counter, making a beeline for the door. By the time I reached my car, the hooded figure had disappeared. It was surreal, like something out of a horror movie. The drive home was an absolute nightmare, with me constantly checking my mirrors and jumping at every little shadow that seemed out of place. Driving home that night was not easy. I was shaken, constantly checking my rear view mirror, expecting to see that hooded figure again. Every shadow seemed to be hiding a threat. When I finally reached my apartment, I felt a wave of relief. The familiarity of my own place gave me a sense of safety. I thought I could finally relax and forget about the eerie encounter at the gas station. I even had almost forgotten about the sandwich and chips I'd left at the counter. I was just about to go to bed when there was a knock on my door. The sound was slow, almost deliberate, and sent chills down my spine. With a pounding heart, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. I couldn't believe what I saw. It was him, the hooded guy from the gas station. Terror streamed through my veins, and I quickly dialed 911 on my phone. I was still watching the guy through the peephole, my soul hammering in my body. The arrival of the cops with their flashing red and blue lights gave me a sense of relief, but when they searched the area, they found no one. The guy had disappeared again, leaving no trace behind. The experience left me rattled, and even now, every unexpected knock on my door scares me. The memory of that night at the gas station has haunted me ever since, turning ordinary into extraordinary, mundane into a terrifying memory.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.